The following is a Papi Chulo Radio original program. The views and opinions expressed in the commentaries and/or interviews in the following program are solely those of the individuals and are not views of Papi Chulo Radio, its parent, affiliate, or subsidiary companies.
The Avengers Initiative, WandaVision.
Welcome to the Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, a PapiChuloRadio.com original series. Papi Chulo Radio, celebrating a decade of podcasting excellence. Today is Monday, January 18th, 2021, and I'm your host, Jeffrey Aruz. During this podcast, we'll be having an in-depth discussion on Disney Plus's WandaVision. Please welcome my co-hosts, Professor X.
Flourish.
And Priscilla Rocha.
Glamour.
I love it. Let's jump into our discussion of Season 1, Episode 2, which was titled Episode 2 and debuted January 15th, 2021 via Disney+. Here's the official synopsis of the episode. In an effort to fit in, Wanda and Vision perform a magic act in their community talent show. All right, everyone, let's break this episode down because this is an episode where so much happened. Yes, there was the sitcom storyline, but there was so much subtext to everything that was going on that, you know, for those that found the first episode maybe lacking in that, they got a whole bunch in this episode. So let's start off actually by talking about, and so we're going to go slightly out of order because I want to save that opening scene because I have a huge question about that, about something else. So let's talk about the theme song. I mean, it really wasn't anything as far as lyrics, but clearly, since we're in the 1960s now, with, Wanda's no longer wearing, the dresses and that sort of thing like they did in the 50s, like the housewives did in the 50s. She's wearing pants and all that kind of stuff. We get a Bewitched / I Dream of Jeannie, but clearly it's Bewitched, more Bewitched, opening theme and animation. And there are so many Easter eggs in that opening. What did we see? What did you all see?
I saw the Grim Reaper mask.
There was that.
And that's his arch rival, right? Vision's arch rival? Like, it has nothing to do with his death or like his purported I did when I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, that they're talking about him dying, but my boyfriend was like, no, that's his rival in the comics. That's his helm. I was like, oh, okay.
There was that, yes. There was also, so when we initially see, it's the moon, right? And then there are stars around it, and I think they correlate with the Infinity Stones.
Well, they could, or they basically formed, it was 6 points. So it's a hexagon, which could also be the same shape that ended the last episode when Wanda and Vision, went out of the episode into whoever was watching them. It was a hexagon shape, so it could equally have been that.
True. Some people are saying the hexagon.
Or that shape could have been that. Or the hexagon, sometimes Vision's, the Infinity Stone in his head. Some artists have chosen to draw that as a hexagon, so it could be that as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Some people are theorizing online. They think the hexagon shape, it's shaped like a honeycomb. And so some people are thinking maybe, it's the idea.
Aiming.
No, not aim. Aim is that comes up with something else that happens, but because we do see a beekeeper later. But some people are thinking maybe, in essence, Wanda is the queen bee, and everyone else that's involved in this, whether we're calling it a pocket dimension or whatnot, they're her bees, her worker bees. So it's like the hive mentality, and they're all trying to keep up the ruse for Wanda.
Oh, that is interesting because a honeycomb is a hexagon, so maybe.
Yes. Yes. So speaking of the Grim Reaper, apparently, so in this episode we see a license plate. Oh, no, no, no! In the license plate in the opening of the first episode, it has 0102 in it, and apparently that's the number of the comic in which the Grim Reaper first meets Vision. So take that what you mean. Apparently, also, was it Visions? Was it Mrs. Hart, or is it Agnes that they wear a pendant showing a Grim Reaper figure? So there's that.
One thing I think we should all keep in mind is the people who are creating these shows know all of this much better than the rest of us,
Well, yes.
and they could just be fucking with us.
There is that too, which, yeah, there's that.
If I was doing a show like this, I would throw in so many red herrings to lead everyone. There was a moment, there was a featurette about WandaVision that came out, and everyone was going out on about the fact that, when they were interviewing this one person, there was a picture of Wonder Man in the background.
Oh, yeah,
Like, Wonder Man's obviously going to come in. Come on, this is Marvel. They're not going to make a mistake like that. If they shoot someone with a picture of Marvel with a picture of Wonder Man in the background, they want you to see it. They are playing with you. And I think a lot of what goes on, last episode we had, the wine with House of M on it. There's a lot of stuff they're throwing in there just for the sake of putting it in there. And, we've seen that in, the CW verse, Arrowverse shows. They will use names and references and stuff like that just for the sake of throwing it in there for fan service. That doesn't mean that there's anything more to it than that. So, I mean, the way we all react, obsessive morons, taking 30 seconds of a show and breaking it down frame by frame like the sad, pathetic freaks they are. That's ridiculous. Not everything that happens in a frame matters.
True, but it does mean something. Like in the store, during the animated opening, there are two ads that were interesting: Bova Milk and Anti-A's. So Bova is a cow in the comics that evolved to walk and talk like a human and served as a midwife at the birth of Wanda and Pietro Maximoff. So there's that. And Anti-A's is it involves Agatha Harkness. It's a shout out to her. Whether, it means anything in the larger scheme of things or not, it was still an interesting Easter egg. None.
You want to throw down on Marvel trivia?
Yes.
Bova, offspring of the high evolutionary Mount Wundagore. Agatha Harkness, you want to throw down with me?
Well, no. But did you notice it?
I did. But
okay.
I think that's just stuff they're throwing in there to just be, and again, it's not, they're intentionally doing that to throw people off. I think it's just fan service, putting names that we recognize in the same way that if you're watching The Flash or, an Arrowverse show or something like that, they'll have, Marv Wolfman Drive or something like that. And the fans go, oh my God, it's Marv Wolfman. It doesn't mean anything in the larger narrative sense of the show, I don't think.
All right.
Yeah, I agree with Professor X. It's just a nice little hint for people that are comic viewers to go like, oh my God, did you see that? Yeah. And so they can like high five and go, that's cool. They get us. They understand us. And so you can feel cool about yourself for getting that.
But do we really feel cool, Priscilla?
Yes.
Okay, we do.
too.
All right. Okay, so let's go a little bit out of order and let's talk about the commercial during this 1960s WandaVision episode. And we have a commercial for Strucker Watches. He'll make time for you. And it's very hydrified for those out there that are keeping tabs. What do we think of the commercial? Was this one a little bit more straightforward versus the one from the first episode?
Oh,
Priscilla?
yeah, this one beat you over the head with it. Like,
Well, let me talk for the next 5 minutes about this commercial. I can't.
Okay.
No, this was absolutely straightforward. The only thing we got out of it was the name Strucker, and with a name like Strucker, you know it has to taste good, and the Hydra logo. I didn't see anything else, and believe me, I tried, because I was, after the first episode, I was thinking, oh, the commercials are going to be really important. We have to analyze everything that happens in the commercials. This episode, yeah, the commercial was just some dude wearing a watch. I
Yeah.
thought for a moment, is he wearing the watch upside down? Nope, he wasn't. He was just wearing it because when he turns his wrist to his face, it will be right side up. And so I saw nothing in that commercial.
Yeah, I think
Same people as the first commercial, which
Yes.
might be interesting.
Especially-
same man,
yeah.
same woman.
especially if they keep on picking the same people, you know, if they're the
Then
stars.
it has to mean something. What it means, I have no idea. But yeah, unlike the last episode where, you know, obviously I went into a disturbing level of detail about that commercial, I didn't see anything in this commercial that stood up to that level of scrutiny.
This is not my theory. This is the theory that I read, but some people think that those are Wanda's parents.
Oh, I had not heard that. Interesting thought.
It's interesting.
I mean, you know, I've also heard a theory that, you know, if you look at the first one, it was Stark, and you know, it was established in Avengers: Age of Ultron, a movie which I believe, Jeff, is your favorite in the MCU canon.
no, but it is the most important.
You know, established, you know, the Stark, name for Wanda. And in this episode, we have Strucker, and it was Baron Strucker who, you know, experimented on Wanda and her sister Pietro to give them their powers. So, you know, on these two episodes, obviously both commercials have a resonance with Wanda, but I don't think we have enough to extrapolate.
I don't disagree, but it is fun to try to extrapolate something. All right, so speaking of extrapolating.
Oh, let me just point out, in this commercial, no cocks or balls.
Oh,
So
okay.
just saying.
Yeah. Oh, the listeners were wondering at home. Okay, so let's talk about this opening scene, because it starts off in a very sitcom-y type of way, you know, the mysterious sound outside. Well, why don't you check? Well, why don't you check? Well, why don't you check? Well, I don't want to check. Like, you know, they play around with that sitcom trope. They also play around with the separate beds trope, which isn't really a trope. It was part of the Hays Code of decency and morality and that kind of stuff. If you want to just spend an afternoon fascinated by what the hell was approved and not to be seen on television back in the Disney, well, not just television, but in films as well, just do a Google search for the Hays Code and spend your afternoon reading that, because it's fascinating what people could and could not do in movies and television until the rating system really came into effect. Only bad people could kill. You cannot have the hero kill at all without consequences. It was fascinating. But yeah, so separate beds.
Nowadays, we live in a world where only bad people can use Android phones and only good people can use Apple phones. So
That is true.
what a strange world we live in now.
I do co-sign that. So they play around with that. They have separate beds, but then they put the beds together. I believe Bewitched, actually, was the first show in which the married couple shared the bed on screen. So it's appropriate, because this episode was very Bewitched-y. So it's the mysterious noise outside. We hear that noise later on. We're not going to talk about the noise later on right now. We will talk about that later on. But I want to talk about the noise right now because I feel like the noise that happened at the start of the episode is in direct correlation with a new character that we meet in this episode, Geraldine. Are we all agreeing with that?
I don't know that I agree. I don't think there's any necessary connection between the noise and Geraldine per se. I think Geraldine is important and her introduction is important and she will continue to be important going forward. I don't know if the noise necessarily correlates to her introduction, though.
Okay. I do, and I will say why if Priscilla also disagrees.
I don't know. Like, that the noise is consistent with Geraldine.
Disagree.
I'll disagree.
Okay, see, here's my line of thinking. I don't think Geraldine existed before this episode in this WandaVision television world. I think that noise, which we heard later on, is in essence a breaking of that reality and the real world sort of puncturing its way into this world, whatever we're going to call it, a pocket dimension, is sort of like what I have called it. So I think that's the real world breaking into pocket dimension. And I think Geraldine was sent in that night, and that's why she became a part of the world. If we notice when she's talking to Wanda, she breaks for a moment, and like her real self, we all know who she really is, right? Do we?
Yes, we do. But I'm just wondering what tortured process of logic could lead you to assume that just because someone hesitates before they say their name to someone, that means they were ported in from another universe. Go ahead, Jeff. Explain yourself.
Because this is WandaVision. So Geraldine, the actual character that she is Monica Rambeau. And so I think she sort of bust in, and that's where the noise came from. And I think she was in there doing reconnaissance, and I think she accidentally got sucked into the sitcom world, and that's why she's Geraldine. So I think there is a direct correlation between the noise and Geraldine showing up.
You are retconning your ass off based on the fact that you know the actress playing Geraldine is actually Monica Rambeau.
Well, it was announced like months ago.
Yeah, so. But that doesn't mean you can watch the episode and go, oh, this means she bounced into the universe.
Well, no. Well, after watching the episode and after hearing the noise, I mean, to me, at least, it seems like the most logical explanation of what that was. I mean, it was in essence a sitcom-y trope that they were using, but the fact that we heard that same noise again, it leads me to believe that that's how Geraldine was introduced into the sitcom world.
Okay, based on the logic you just said, play with me here. Oh, someone just poured into my universe.
Yes, they just did. Who is it?
Oh my God, who are you?
Yes. I do agree. I love that you're...
Priscilla, back me up here. Come on.
I love that y'all know that I'm right.
I kind of agree. Like, what makes you think it wasn't just the helicopter coming in and making the sound?
I think it was both. I think Geraldine was on that helicopter. We haven't gotten to the helicopter yet, so I might as well mention it. So later on that morning, Wanda finds something incredibly unusual in her front yard. So this is a black and white world. She finds a fully in Technicolor helicopter, a toy helicopter in like a bush. And it is the colors of Iron Man's suit. And so it's like the red and the goldenish yellow. And it's got a sword logo on it. And my thinking is, because I don't think that was a toy helicopter, I think that was a real helicopter. But because it entered this pocket dimension and it entered the 1960s, when maybe it's a high tech helicopter, maybe it acclimated to that world and it turned into a toy, or maybe the pocket dimension turned it into a toy or something like that. But I think that was a real helicopter, and I think that's where Monica was on that to like. It's not a surprise for me that they both showed up at the same time. Wanda looked freaked out, and I'm surprised that didn't really break her. Because we saw in the first episode, she sort of broke a little bit. She spaced out, and she does space out later on. But I'm surprised that seeing the helicopter didn't, it clearly shook her, but it didn't shake her. It didn't rattle her.
It didn't trigger one of those weird Lynchian moments again.
Yes, it almost did, but Agnes showed up.
Well, that's two things about that. One, if you look at it, when she looked at the helicopter, she glanced back at the house, specifically at one room in the house, as if that was a room occupied by a child who might have a toy helicopter. There is no child with the toy helicopter at this point. But then, as you say, she was disrupted by Agnes. And then what did she do? She hid the helicopter. She clearly did not want Agnes to see this helicopter. So I think obviously it means far more than, a toy helicopter in the rose bushes. What it means, I don't think we know yet. And again, I think that's, kind of what, they're playing with in this show is they're not giving us the answers. They are just raising questions and forcing us to discuss interminably whether, a sound in the background means someone has jumped into your universe.
Mm-hmm.
Jerk.
I know, and you will see that I was right, and it's okay. It's fine. We all see the light of day at some point. Okay, so...
Or hear it, as the case might be.
Well, speaking of hearing it, perfect segue. Since we're talking about some of the weird stuff. Okay, so we will be talking about Emma Caulfield as a character at a certain point. So let's try to hold off on chatting about Emma Caulfield specifically as Dottie. Let's talk about the radio. So at a certain point in the episode, radio is playing music. It's the Beach Boys, Help Me Rhonda. And then all of a sudden, we hear what I hope should be a familiar character for those of us that follow the MCU, saying Wanda. Are you okay? Wanda. Wanda. And Wanda and Dottie both are a little confused. They're, Dottie's still sort of going on and being Dottie, but Wanda's clearly entranced and distracted. And, yeah. What do we think this means? And this is also another time when we see a splash of color in the episode because Dottie's glass shatters and she bleeds red. And they're both sort of shocked, but then immediately go back to the sitcom status quo. So, did we all recognize the voice on the radio?
It's Randall Park,
I believe
isn't it?
Yes.
Yay!
SHIELD agent.
Got it.
Is he SHIELD? Yeah, he was SHIELD.
Yeah, he
right?
was.
Yeah.
Sword now?
Well, yeah, he's SWORD now, clearly, based on all the damn
We
logos.
don't know that. We don't know that. You
okay.
are speculating
Okay.
wildly just because of thumping noises you heard in the background.
And logos. But okay, so it's Jimmy Woo, a voice we should know from Ant-Man, the first one, or just
Ant-Man 2?
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Both Ant-Man.
Both Ant-Mans, right?
Yeah.
And
I don't think he's been anything else, has he?
yeah, I'm trying to think. He was not in any of the Spider-Mans, right? No. No,
I don't think so.
So I think the Ant-Man movies. But clearly a character set up in the MCU as somebody who's a part of something. So what is this? What does this mean? Any theories? Any ideas?
Well, what I found interesting about it is that, and, I saw a lot of people online, argue that Emma Caulfield was, the big bad, a big bad, let's just come out and say it, Mephisto. But if you look at the way they played this scene, it seemed like Emma Caulfield Ford was equally taken aback by what happened as Wanda was. And if you're arguing that this is Emma Caulfield Ford was playing the person who was manipulating everything, they wouldn't have been that surprised by that moment. So it felt to me like a scene that undercut the idea that this was the big bad, for the season. I thought it was really interesting, and I loved the way they used the sound from the radio to, especially "Help Me, Rhonda," help me, Wanda, was brilliantly done. And then having, Randall Park coming in as that familiar voice, no identification of his face necessary. It's just a face that, again, if you are an MCU fan, you will immediately recognize this is someone. I recognize that voice. That's why it matters more. And also what he was saying was, Wanda, where are you? Trying to reach out to her. I think that reinforces some of the things we were talking about last episode, which is that, is this something that Wanda is doing on her own? Is this something that someone is doing this to her? At this point in the episode, we don't know yet, but it's clear that, Wanda is off the reserve and, people are trying to reach out to her. And I thought it was a very clever way of doing it. And also, setting up that scene, with again, Emma Caulfield Ford, as, someone that, seemed to be the queen bee, but, when the radio started reacting, she seemed totally taken aback. And I thought that was interesting because if she is the character that a lot of people have been speculating that she was, I don't think she would react in that way.
Correct. I don't think she's that character either. And what do we think of the red with the blood? Significance to that? Outside of just giving us the visual?
Well, the visual played off of Wanda finding the helicopter earlier, because the red against the black and white background stands out so much, but it stands out so much more because it suggests that whatever that helicopter was intruding into this reality, the same thing is happening with her. And it might mean nothing, but her saying to Wanda, how do you deal with that? You deal with it yourself, and then going off to deal with it could mean more depending on who she is going forward. And I certainly hope that Emma Caulfield Ford is a character that we encounter in more episodes, because when I was watching the episode, I was thinking, who is she? Why is she so familiar? I can't place who she is. And it turns out she was Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I was, oh my God, that is Anya. And I haven't seen her in the longest time, but I just, as someone who liked Buffy, I have, a tremendous fondness towards that character. Yeah. What they will do with her going forward, I don't know, but I do hope that we see more of her.
I don't disagree. I loved her as well, and she's all grown up. Priscilla, anything else to add in regards to the radio, Agent Woo, the blood?
I think that the blood in the hand signifies that maybe she's an agent, or maybe she's probably like associated with S.W.O.R.D. or with the world in some way or another. Maybe she's either a villain or she's either with S.W.O.R.D., but she's something to do with this world too. She's a player in this game. That's why her blood is red when it happens, and she's not just like Vision, like somehow like disappearing, or her like blood is gray when the cut happens. It's just,
she's a real girl.
Yeah, she's a real girl.
I love that. All right.
Interesting theory. I think that's really interesting.
I like that too. Now, speaking of the devil and the Grim Reaper, there were a couple of lines in this episode that were interesting. The devil's in the details. That's not the only place he is. I mean, it was, in essence, a sitcom-y type of line. But does it mean something?
Mephisto.
There is that, and also, I mean, just to jump ahead to the actual fundraiser for the children, and them repeating it like almost like a cultian mantra for the children. Is it for the children? If there is a big bad, do they want certain somebody to have a children's?
Well, again, if you're looking at the conventional MCU, not the MCU, but the Marvel Comics tradition, Marvel and the Vision did have a pair of twins. And, it turns out that they weren't real. They were, a manifestation of Scarlet Witch's powers, which caused her to go mad. And, in the House of M storyline, she wiped out all the mutants, yada, yada, yada. But I do think that for the children is interesting because when they're doing a fundraiser for the school, you think they're talking about for the children, meaning the children going to the school. At the point that they're doing that, Vision and Scarlet Witch is not pregnant. It could be argued that they're arguing that all of what you're doing is for the birth of these children. Who are these children? Interesting, argument. We didn't get enough in this episode to really argue, one way or the other. And again, it sort of, as I was saying in the last episode, it sort of feels like, they're playing with us because, if you are an obsessive Marvel fan, or you are looking for every indication. Oh, is this? What is this? What does that mean? But I did think it was interesting. And yeah, as I say, I don't know. I liked Priscilla's idea that, the fact that, Emma Caulfield Ford, when she cut her hand, she bled. And that was the only red we saw aside from the helicopter. Could that indicate she's real when everyone else isn't? In which case, maybe they're subverting the expectations. Last episode, everyone was arguing that Catherine Hahn was, because her name was Agnes, she was going to be Agatha Harkness, the beneficial person. Could it be that she's actually the malevolent figure trying to manipulate Wanda? I think they're playing it very cleverly because, up to the end of this episode, I don't think we know enough to judge either way. I think, Catherine Hahn's character could be the good guy or she could be the big bad. And I think they're playing it very effectively, in terms of, the little bits of information they're doling out to us.
Well, just I do want to continue on with the red theme, but you mentioned Agnes, Senor Scratchy.
Aw, the rabbit.
Well, no, Nicholas Scratch isn't that Agatha Harkness's son?
Oh.
Senor Scratchy.
Whoa, I did not catch that at all.
Didn't catch that.
Well, okay. I don't know if Senior Scratchy or Mr. Scratchy, but Old Scratch is a traditional name for the devil.
That too. That is true too.
So that could argue that, or it could just be a rabbit who scratches.
True. Now, are you ready to get your mind blown? As if I didn't already with Nicholas Scratch? Okay.
How could I have missed that?
I know. So speaking of like the devil in the details and the theme of red, there was another bit of red in this episode. The big red gum. So this episode
Wow.
No. This is what's going to blow your mind because I don't know if this was intentional because they wanted specifically that brand, but this is an episode that's supposed to be in the 60s. Big red gum didn't exist until 1975. So I feel like Big Red, with the theme of red and the devil and whether it's Mephisto or Grim Reaper, I feel like they specifically wanted that brand because they wanted to say Big Red to continue on with that theme.
Well, as someone who spent, 10 minutes analyzing 30 seconds of the last episode,
Yes.
I doff my hat to you. I had not seen that. I had no idea when Big Red came along. And Oh, that is really interesting. Between the Old Scratch and Big Red, that is interesting.
Yeah, because
Although,
they
the Big
specifically
Red
wanted
gum
that one.
coming from, just, a random, what I would call an NPC in the show. Oh, that is interesting. It could suggest that, whoever, if, there is a malevolent force behind that, it's controlling basically all of the, the non-player characters outside of Wanda and Vision, or, most of them. Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah, and it was just a throwaway thing that happened in the episode, which set up the sitcom-y sort of comedic antics, but fascinating nonetheless. Let's talk about the sitcom-y antics in this episode, because they really gave Paul Bettany the chance to play with comedy, the chance he had never gotten in the MCU, point blank, and the period. So Vision, remember, he can't eat anything, and they specifically mentioned that in the first episode, so it's something that was introduced or reintroduced or reminded, something that we were all reminded of. And, he wants to fit in with the boys, talking about the neighborhood watch and the safety protocols and this, that, or the other. And he's offered some big red gum. He bites it, and I think he was just going to chew it, but then he gets sort of like patted on the back and he swallows it. And so we get this lovely, very 60s animation of the gum gumming up the works in him. And it allowed Paul Bettany to play a very much, in essence, a drunk Vision when they have to do this magic act at the talent show. We saw the magic act being practiced at the house, and then we see it in full effect at the talent show. What did we think of Vision, of Gummy Vision? Professor?
Well, Paul Bettany is, a very skilled actor, and I don't think we appreciate how good he can be funny. If you go back and watch the movie A Knight's Tale, you'll see Paul Bettany just playing an absolutely funny, off-the-wall character. The moments that we've had him playing funny in the Marvel Universe so far have been basically dry. This was him playing, just funny, over the top, and he did it really, really well. He was playing a character basically being drunk. And it's kind of interesting to think about, you're someone who has superpowers, but you're supposed to keep them secret. But when you get drunk, you just, you're starting flying and lifting up stuff and doing all these things. It was really, really funny to see him do that. But even more funny was watching Wanda trying to overcome what he was doing. So he was really, really funny, as I say, but he was just funny to set up what Wanda was doing to overcome him. And something that, we referred to, the idea that this was the Bewitched series. In the last episode, Wanda's powers were basically simple telekinesis. In this episode, she was doing pure magic, to, manipulating reality on a basic level. I wonder whether, one of the things that they're doing in this series is, advancing Wanda's powers with each series. Last episode, it was very basic. This episode's more advanced. If that continues for the next 3, 4, 5 series, what will Wanda be at the end of it? I think that could be, terrifying.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like we're at least going into the 2000s as far as...
Well, and one
sitcom.
could argue that if someone is manipulating Wanda, they could be doing this in this way in order to advance her powers to take advantage of them.
Mm-hmm. I will also make a note that the hearts are still around. We saw them at the talent show, so that means Vision still has his job. This mysterious job that I'm very suspicious about.
I still think the whole end game to this is Vision doing that data crunching, and for the children, for Wanda and Vision's kids. I think those two things are whatever this nefarious something or other that's keeping them there, that's what they're using them for those two things.
That's interesting. Could Wanda have made a deal with the Grim Reaper or Mephisto? Is that how you say it? Mephisto?
Yeah,
Mephisto?
Mephisto.
Mephisto. Could she have made a deal with either of them to bring Vision back, but the deal is she has to have kids or something that will belong to them?
There are minor demonic characters in the Marvel universe that it could be as well. You've got Mephisto, but you've also got Nightmare.
Yeah, I've heard
like
of
that.
Nightmare. There's one that begins with like a CH something?
Cthulhu?
Yes, I've heard that name being thrown around as well.
Yes, that's Lovecraft, not the Marvel universe.
Oh, okay. Well, then somebody posted that as a comment somewhere and they were mistaken. Okay. All right. Okay. Interesting ideas. I will have to wait and see what happens. Priscilla, what about you? What did you think of the sitcom-y antics with Vision, the gum, and the talent show?
That made me crack up so much. I never knew that Bettany had so much like range in him that he could go from like straight-laced, stiff upper crust sort of man playing a robot to just this drunk, lackadaisical guy who was just waiting for the next trick to kind of elucidate to everybody else that finally that yes, that there are miracles and there's magic in this world and you guys just have to like open your eyes and believe and finally like see that there is something bigger than you out there in this universe and it's right in front of you. Like, I don't know, like it was so funny to me, and especially when with Wanda trying to like figure out ways to explain all of his tricks without it looking like it's magic, especially the mirror when the lady is like, I don't think mirrors work that way, and Dottie's like, shut up.
Yes.
It was so funny.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it.
The comedy was fantastic.
One thing I thought about that scene where Paul Bettany was basically getting drunk, that I thought might be more than just subtext rather than text, is when he said, we are going to lie to you. We are not what we seem. That seemed to me like maybe something that had a little more resonance than just someone playing a magician in front of the local rubes. I thought that was maybe more Wanda and Vision talking to everyone.
That's interesting because the follow-up line was the comedy because she was like, you're not supposed to say that to the audience, but that's interesting, that line. Well,
if you're looking at this show as being a little metatextual, then that would make perfect sense.
Yeah. I loved Agnes. You sure you don't want to make, a man named Ralph disappear? So we got another Ralph reference in this episode.
And also, talking about Agnes, there were several, if you go back and watch this episode, really slowly, there were several scenes in which Catherine Hahn, at the end of the scene, when you would normally cut away, they hold on her for not even a second, like half a second, slightly longer than you would otherwise. And she has, reactions that, seem more significant.
Well, she checked out the mailman's ass.
Well, yes, but it seems, there were several, scenes where, she was looking at people, whether it was, in the scene with Dee Dee or, at the thing where she's looking off to the side, like she's looking at something and reacting to it, which leads me, much more than last episode to suggest that I think that, it seems much more likely that she is the Agatha Harkness character. something I was talking about earlier is the idea that, the NPCs, most of the characters, most of the people that we see in this world are non-player characters. Wanda and Vision are obviously the player characters. It seems to me that Agnes is a player character. Gwendolyn, Monica, is a player character. They are not, products of the simulation. They are real people with, real motivations and real actions and stuff like that. I think Agnes is like that, just like, Vision, Wanda, and Monica is. Maybe Dee Dee. I don't think we got much of a sense that any of the other characters like that, but I did get a real sense in this episode that Agnes is a player rather than an NPC.
Okay, and my question about Agatha Harkness from the comics, because I'm not that comic book knowledgeable outside of just a little research that I've done here and there. Agatha Harkness is not a villain. She's an ally to the Scarlet Witch? Question mark.
Agatha is Agatha. She is her own thing. She is basically chaotic good or chaotic neutral. You mentioned Bova, the character. Bova is a creation of the High Evolutionary. Agatha Harkness was, a witch who lived near Mount Wundagore, which was created by the High Evolutionary, and took care of them. She was killed, came back several times. She was the mentor of the Scarlet Witch and taught her to manipulate her powers. She died again. She came back, leading to one of my favorite scenes because she basically became, for the Marvel Universe, the superpowered nanny who would take care of your kids if you were superpowered beings who had kids. So at one point she came back. She had died, and then when Reed Richards and Sue Richards had a kid, Agatha Harkness just showed up saying, "I'm here to be your nanny." And there was one point at which, because they all knew she was dead, Reed Richards said, "You were dead. You can't just say you got better." But that was all she would say. She's this mystical, magical character who's not entirely bound. So you don't know what exactly her powers or her extent is. When she's faced by someone who's really powerful, it seems arbitrarily powerful. When she's faced by someone who's not that powerful, she doesn't seem that powerful. So she's like a really interesting, nebulous character. So invoking her in this context, they'll have to decide at some point who she is and what she can do or what she can't do. But if, Agnes is Agatha Harkness, I think that's really an interesting choice, because I think Catherine Hahn would be a very interesting character to play that. And I think we saw multiple instances in this episode where she was reacting to something happening slightly off camera or slightly off scene. It's like she was seeing something that the rest of us weren't seeing, which I think leans into the idea that either Catherine Hahn's character is Agatha Harkness or she's going to be the ultimate big bad.
Okay, interesting. Since this is the Bewitched episode, so she's kind of like Aunt Clara. She's, kind of kooky and fun. I like it. Okay. So let's talk about specifically Geraldine. So this is Tiana Paris's MCU debut. Not the debut of her character. We saw a youngster version of Monica Rambeau in Captain Marvel. That movie took place in the 90s, so, it's no longer the 90s. So it makes sense that she is grown up. What did we think of Geraldine? Just in general. Priscilla?
I like her. I think she's peachy keen, like she said with the band.
She's the bee's knees.
I think she's fully stuck in this world, though. Like, unlike Dottie, who kind of had the shake-up and maybe understood that there's something not quite right about this world, I think she's fully stuck in this world now. And I
Yeah,
think it's gonna take something like bigger to shake her out of it.
I do too. Yeah, we had that moment in the
Because even
beginning.
when she was stuck in Vision's like lockbox in the back, and she's like, "How did you get me in the back there?" Like, if she was really like an agent, she would have known like, oh, these people have powers or something. Like, she would have known and like joshed them over it or something like that, but she didn't.
No, because I think that the whatever this is, the pocket dimension that I keep on calling it, I think it's taken a hold of her. I think she's gonna need something like when Wanda saw the toy helicopter to like really rattle her out of it. I think in the beginning she was confused, but then once she sort of turned and she was like, "I'm Geraldine," and she had the smile, the '60s smile. I was like, "No, you gone, girl." Like something's gonna have to shake her to get her out of that. And Professor, our other new character for this episode was Dottie Jones, played by your girl, Emma Caulfield. What did you think of her just in general and the type of character that she played? The sort of queen bee of maybe not the PTA or whatever it was that she was, the Women's Society.
Well, before I get to her, just talking about Monica Rambeau. I thought it was interesting that the moment that she was introduced to Wanda, there was that hesitation, that moment where she was thinking, who am I supposed to be? Which I think, going forward, because we know this actress is playing Monica Rambeau, not someone named Geraldine, we'll realize why she was, at that moment. But yeah, Emma Caulfield, it was funny because watching the episode, I was looking at her thinking, she is so familiar. I can't figure out who she is. Why do I have this, positive, feeling towards her, even though I can't figure out who she is? And it was afterwards when I, Google searched her name that I realized, oh my God, that was Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I thought she was really an interesting character because she started out being just totally the queen bee for the entire community to an ridiculous extent. But that scene that we talked about earlier where, she cut her hand listening to the radio. And boy, I just, it didn't feel to me at that moment like she was the bad guy. It felt like she was someone who was outside of what was happening and became aware. And, I just don't know. Oh, yeah, as I say, it's entirely possible she will be the big bad. It doesn't seem like that at the end of the episode, especially when she brought Vision and Wanda in to get their award. But I don't know. It's really interesting. And as I say, you could look at Catherine Hahn's character as being the good guy or the bad guy. It's entirely possible that Dottie could be the good guy, even though I think most of us are looking at, she's the bad guy because she's, the queen bee and she's obviously stereotypically the bad guy. She could be the one who is aware of things and is trying to help Wanda just as much as it's possible that she's the bad guy. I don't think we know enough after 2 episodes to say one way or the other, but I do hope we see more of her, and I hope we see more of Catherine Hahn's character going forward.
I can agree with that as well. Priscilla, before we move on, anything to add in regards to Dottie? Did you immediately recognize Emma Caulfield? Were you excited to see her?
The way you are about Marvel and going back to see it is the way I am about Buffy. So I just recently seen Buffy. So
Ah.
I recognized Emma Caulfield like that. And I was like, oh my God, it's Emma Caulfield. What are you doing in my Marvel? And how did I not know that you were going to be cast in the show? And then I looked at her Instagram feed and I was like, oh, okay, she wasn't allowed to say that she was cast in this until like way, way into the
Yeah,
series.
it was like, I think she announced it like the day before, maybe 2 days before. all of the episodes dropped, she was like, I can finally talk about this. I'm in this really neat show. And I was like, oh, look at that.
In my
So
defense, I would like to say that if she hadn't been in black and white, I think I would have recognized her sooner. I was looking at her thinking, oh, what color is her hair?
Well,
Which
she's
is
also,
a joke for Anya.
I mean, she's also dressed in like 1960s attire. So I can,
Yeah.
it did take me like half a second to be like, oh yeah, that is her.
yeah, but I recognized her right away, and I love her acting, and I feel like she's gonna do this like bitchy character a real service. Like she's gonna knock it out of the park with this character. I feel like it's gonna have some layers to it. I feel like it's not just gonna be like the PTA woman. I feel like the blood symbolizes that there's gonna be more to her. And I feel like with Dottie, Wanda's gonna have to be careful with how she portrays herself. That she can't just be herself. She has to be more than herself. She has to jump through those hoops that Dottie has for her children in the future. To have the best like schooling and the best locations for them and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's gonna be tough, but it's gonna be interesting.
Yes. Speaking of interesting, we're going to talk about something very interesting in a moment. What I want to do right now is ask you all the same question that I asked at the start of our previous podcast, because it's gonna tie into what we're going to be discussing in a moment. Are we fans of sitcoms from the 1960s? Priscilla?
Dude, Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie were my jam growing up. I loved them. So this is my wheelhouse. I loved this episode so much for its like references to the 1960s. This was definitely my bag.
All right, Professor?
Oh, totally. Whether it's Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie, this episode felt totally, in sync with those.
Okay, and I will agree. I love Bewitched, love Genie as well. Definitely, this one was incredibly Bewitched. I thought the fashions were really good, as well as the style of the house, because the house changed as well, which was really interesting to see. So they really they focused on the small minute details to really nail the era. And in the 60s on TV, we moved from black and white television shows into color, which leads us to the next thing that we're going to be talking about. I will make note, both Bewitched and Genie started off in black and white, and they eventually, a couple seasons in, turned into color. I think Bewitched, maybe it was 2 seasons, and Genie, I think it was just 1 season black and white, and then it turned into color, something like that. I know Bewitched is the older show, so it was in black and white for a couple years longer. There's also different Darrens, if for those out there that maybe didn't know. There was that whole thing. Anyway, let's talk about WandaVision and that final scene. So, all right. It's the they arrive home from the talent show. I will say that they were trying to sneak away from the talent show, but they were caught, and they were awarded the comedy performance of the year. So they have a trophy and everything. They arrive home. They are celebrating, and all of a sudden, Wanda turns around and she's pregnant. And she has a baby bump that appears literally out of nowhere. And they're about to celebrate that when they hear that familiar banging noise from the start of the episode. and they walk outside and they find a man, or I don't even want to say a man. They find a person dressed in a beekeeper's outfit coming out of the sewer. So they're climbing out of the sewers. There are bees surrounding them. I will say, if you go back to the scene where Agnes and Wanda are talking, and Agnes ends up checking out the mailman's ass, there is no manhole in the street. None. So that manhole appears out of nowhere. That sentence sounds weird if you take it into a different context. Anyway, cock and balls apparently. Wanda says no.
I was just going to say.
I know. Wanda says no. And rewinds the entire screen and goes back to the pregnancy reveal. And now I can't remember the damn line because she says the exact same line. She says it the first time before the beekeeper arrives, and it's said in a very optimistic tone, but she repeats the line. It's something like, "We're going to be okay, right?" And she says it in a more melancholy, "I need assurance" type of voice. And then they kiss after Vision says yes, and the entire world around them goes from black and white into color. Visually stunning what they did. So let's talk about this. What the hell does this mean? Bees and beekeepers and the sewer and black and white to color and pregnancy bumps and all that kind of stuff. Priscilla, what the hell is going on for the children?
I told you it was AIM. I told you that hexagon shape was AIM.
So you think it's AIM?
That's the beekeepers. That's
But wait. There's a sword logo on the beekeeper suits.
Yeah, but you know that AIM has infiltrated Swarm a lot of times too.
Oh, I don't know that, but I will take your expertise. Okay.
And also, like, a lot of people have said that this is also Swarm, like the character, but I'm not so sure it is him, because otherwise it would have come out like as a giant lump of bees.
Okay.
But,
so are you saying you're thinking this is maybe an AIM versus sword type of situation?
yes.
So we have seen AIM in Iron Man 3? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, we've seen AIM in Iron Man 3. Clearly a different type of organization, but Iron Man 3 was many years ago, and if you really think about it, the MCU is technically 5 years ahead. Was it 5 years that they did the jump from the blip that they called? It was like 5 years, right? Or 4 years?
5 years.
Okay, 5 years. So it has been some time since we've seen AIM, so maybe they've developed into a bigger organization if it is AIM versus sword. Interesting theory. I like it. Was there anything else to it, Priscilla? About the baby bumper, Wanda rewinding time?
I still think that Wanda was... I'm amending my theory from last episode and saying that there is a big bad and that Wanda was brought in to, like, fix whatever, like, bubble that he's placed on this place. But Wanda's using it for her own means now. Now she's using it to keep Vision and to keep her children.
Okay. Interesting. Professor, what about you? Your thoughts on the sewers, the beekeeper, Wanda being pregnant, everything turning into color.
Yeah, I think for a variety of reasons, the end of this episode was the most important 2 to 3 minutes of WandaVision so far. It established, one, Wanda is in control of this. Even if she's being manipulated, she is in control. Who was the person in the beekeeper suit? Could it be AIM or it is Sword? We don't know. But it shows that she is controlling this process, which we haven't known up until this point. So I think that's really important. The moment where she is basically converting everything into color is, conceptually, it's going from the 60s black and white to the 70s in color. That's important as well. But it also shows that this is under her control. So whatever is happening in this reality, this world, whatever it is her control. So we are leaving this episode. Wanda is pregnant. She's going to have a child or multiple children. For what reason? Is she being manipulated to manipulate reality, or is it her children that someone or something is manipulating her for? We don't know that.
For the children.
But well, yes. For the children, was all that to get her and Vision to this point? And, for the children, I don't know. And again, I talked about this last episode, but I do think it's interesting to look at, the creators of the show, the director, the writers. They know we are so invested in the MCU that we will keep watching. And, this, the ending of this episode, unlike the last episode was just like, well, that's, kind of interesting. And I said, if you weren't, a watcher of the MCU universe, you wouldn't care. But this episode, I think, we suddenly think, well, what is happening now? And I do find myself personally wondering what's going to happen next episode in a way that I didn't think about that last episode. So I think, they really ramped it up this episode. I don't know what's going to happen next episode in any way. I don't know. Is Captain Han going to be there? Emma Caulfield be there? Will any of the characters be there except Vision and Scarlet Witch? I know that we're going to be traveling into the 70s, so things will be in color. But I don't know what that's going to mean for the show. And I think that's really, brave and daring for the creators of the show because, they are basically assuming that we're going to be on board for this. And I have no idea what's going to happen next.
Yeah. I agree with you on that, outside of the fact that it will be the 70s and 70s fashions and things like that. I thought it was brilliant of Disney Plus to release both of these episodes first. Because I think for Marvel nerds, we would have been excited at the end of that first episode and we would have tuned in the next week. I think for anyone else that's a little bit more casual of viewers, you kind of needed this second episode. Because as you said, Professor, the end of this episode really is a game changer. I think the entire episode, in essence, is a game changer. Like the first episode, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, it really was a setup episode. It introduced us to this world, this sitcom world. It introduced us to the dynamics. It introduced us a little bit to, as Priscilla called it, the David Lynchian type of, menace that was there. But this one, because it dropped so much in this episode and so fast, we had the helicopter. We had the introduction of Geraldine. We had, the look of unease of some of the characters. We had the radio, with, Wanda, are you okay? And we end the episode with Agent Jimmy Woo basically saying, Wanda, is everything okay? Are you okay? Is anyone doing this to you? We had that. And then at the end of it, Wanda gets pregnant, and then the beekeeper turns around and looks at her, and she says no with sort of fear on her face, like fear but yet control, and then she rewinds the scene, and then we turn into color. Like this one, I think really it allows people to just sink in, and they're like, okay, we're in for a ride, we're strapped in, seatbelts on, and we're ready for whatever's coming next. What that is, we don't know.
And based on that, I have heard that some reviewers were given the first 3 episodes, and they said that, the end of the 3rd episode completely changes everything, which might be why they only revealed the first 2 episodes to a mass audience. So
interesting. I guess we got something to look forward to in episode 3, as if we didn't already. So, all right. Before we hand out some of the stuff that we hand out at the end, was there anything that I missed? A teeny tiny little moment that was missed that we would like to discuss before we head into the MVP?
Just one quick note that I don't know whether it's going to be of any significance, but the mailman came out in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as someone from the 1930s in the last season. So I don't know whether they just recast the character as somebody else and they just forgot, or if that's going to be of any significance, but there you go.
Okay. They have accidentally done that before with characters or actors that have had smaller roles. I think the most famous person that this has happened to is Alfre Woodard, who played a teeny tiny little role in Civil War, and then she appeared as, and the character escapes my name, from Luke Cage. Yeah, I think that was probably the more famous person that they've reused, that they played different characters. All right. Well, let's get into the MVP. The most valuable player. State which character impressed you throughout the episode and why. Once a character has been chosen, they cannot be selected again. So, choose wisely. Professor, who is your MVP and why?
Paul Bettany. He played funny so well. If you've watched his cinematic career, he's a very funny person, but in the cinematic universe, he hasn't had the chance to display that. But in this episode, he was really, really funny. So, Paul Bettany for me.
Fantastic choice. Priscilla, what about you? Who's your MVP and why?
My MVP is going to be Dottie because I loved the character. I thought she was brilliant, clashing with Elizabeth Olsen's character, and how she played just bitchy in that like correct tone, just being cold and bitchy and just aggravating to everyone else around her, and just we've all met that PTA wife that just aggravating to deal with, but you have to if you want your kids to get into the appropriate school, or you want to have the right tone to have for your house or something. So yeah, we love character, and of course she played it perfectly. So yeah, Emma Caulfield for sure.
Another fantastic choice. And my MVP goes to Geraldine, Tiana Paris. I loved her in this episode so much. She was a breath of fresh air. The introduction to this character into the MCU as a grown-ass human, and she was just fantastic. I really enjoyed her as Geraldine, a new friend for Wanda, potentially. And certainly an ally once her real persona comes out, at least I would hope. But she was just fantastic from beginning to end, especially just the way that she switched it, the confusion and the hesitation on her face, and then all of a sudden, going to that, 1960s sitcom smile was brilliant. So now it is time to rate the episode. How would you rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10 televisions? The point system is allowed, and if you found the episode exceptional, deserving of more than a 10, you may grant it the coveted golden television, now in Technicolor. Let's start off with you, Priscilla.
I'm giving this episode 10 televisions. I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it tickled like every single one of my bewitched fantasies. I thought that it was funny. I thought that it was action-packed. I thought that it was filled with intrigue. I thought that it had enough Marvel tidbits to tickle my comic funny bone, but still had enough drama where I was left hanging and wondering what's going to happen next. And I appreciate that in the show, so definitely a 10.
All right, starting off strong with a solid 10 from Priscilla. Professor, what about you? Where do you stand? How do you rate this episode?
Well, I liked it. I didn't like that much. I'll give it a very solid 8. I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was better than the first episode because, we're leaning into, the MCU mythology. We're finding out more and we're raising more questions. But yeah, I really did like it. It was funny. It was smart. But yeah, man, I can't give it more than an 8 out of 10.
Wait, you said this was better than the first episode?
Yeah.
Didn't you give the first episode a 9?
No, I didn't.
You gave it an 8 then?
Possibly.
Okay. I'm just working with this Canadian
math. I did not
math.
give the first episode a 9. I promise you that.
Okay. Well, then you gave it an 8, so it's the same as the first episode.
Fine. I'll give it an 8.5. Are you
okay.
happy now?
Yes, it brings joy to my heart. So, okay. All right, so we've got no, it was Priscilla that gave it a 9, then I gave the first one an 8.5 because I split you guys in the middle. All right, so we got a 10. We got the professor to bump it up to an 8.5, just to prove yourself correct. I will give it a 9. Part of me wants to give it a 10 because it was so good, but I don't know why. Priscilla has inspired me with what she's done in the past of just holding out a little bit, and I feel like the next episode is going to be even better. So I'm going to hold out just a teeny tiny little bit, and even though my heart is saying a 10, my brain is going to go with a 9. It was fantastic, though. As I mentioned, Geraldine, Dottie, Agnes, the animation with the theme song, the going into color, all the twists and the turns and the little reveals, everything was stellar. Another fantastic episode of WandaVision. So on that note, join us next time for a brand new installment of the Avengers Initiative WandaVision. Here's our announcer to remind you on how you can interact with us.
Follow Poppy Chula Radio on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Poppy Chula Radio. Do you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or concerns? Email us via contact@poppychularadio.com. Are you interested in joining the Poppy Chula Radio team as an on-air personality? Email talent@poppychularadio.com. Binge listen to your favorite Poppy Chula Radio programs by visiting poppychularadio.com/archives. You can also download tonight's broadcast and the rest of the series through Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Just search for The Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, and subscribe.
Thanks, announcer. My co-hosts, please wish the listeners a good night, starting off with Priscilla.
Good night, everybody, and have Technicolor dreams.
I love that. And the professor.
Flourish.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in and download new episodes of the Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, every Tuesday via Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and the Poppy Chula archives. Good night.